Hey guys, tonight we're doing something a little different. No plague, no starvation, no one's getting flayed alive. I know, weird, right? Tonight we're talking about Taoism, a 2,500-year-old philosophy that took one look at the world and said, nah, I'm good. So dim the lights, maybe burn some incense, or don't. Taoism wouldn't care. It's not here to micromanage your vibe. Let's begin. You wake up, and for a moment, everything is suspiciously quiet, a silence so complete and foreign to your modern, overstimulated brain that it almost registers as a problem in itself. There are no alarms, no aggressive notifications clawing at your attention, no urgent pings or buzzes demanding that you leap out of bed and into action. Instead, there is simply light, gentle, early morning light that seeps through the bamboo slats overhead, diffused and warm, not blinding or artificial but natural, as if the world itself were politely suggesting the idea of consciousness. There is no tightness in your chest, no grinding pressure in your jaw, no cascade of existential dread crashing down the moment your eyes open. Instead, there is an unfamiliar spaciousness inside your body, a kind of mental exhale you didn't know you'd been holding in for years, and the air you draw into your lungs actually smells like air, clean, slightly earthy, touched by morning dew rather than the burnt tang of overbrewed coffee or the chemical fog of synthetic air fresheners. You rise slowly, without panic, without agenda, and certainly without the digital intrusion of yet another to-do list, shouting that your value depends entirely on how many tasks you can obliterate before lunch. The floor beneath your feet is not sleek or polished or engineered for ergonomic perfection. It is wood, real wood, slightly uneven, with the memory of trees still etched into its grain. And when you move, the sound it makes is not jarring but honest, grounding, an acoustic affirmation that you are alive and in a body, and that, for once, simply being is enough. Outside, a bird calls, not the chirp of some domesticated cage dweller, but the wild, declarative cry of something that's never known. A roof, singing simply because the sun rose again. The breeze is light but insistent, weaving through leaves with the patience of something that has always known how to wait. You step outside, barefoot, onto earth that is neither manicured nor paved, but worn by time, smoothed by generations of souls passing gently over it, a path not designed but discovered. This is Taoism, not in name, not in doctrine, but in essence. It is not a lifestyle brand. It is not a morning routine marketed through curated reels. It is the radical presence of this moment, stripped of striving, devoid of spectacle, inviting you to release your death grip on control and simply let life do what it has always done, unfold. There is no schedule here, no bullet journal filled with colour-coded strategies for mastering your potential. No blaring reminders that you should be meditating, manifesting, networking, or hustling. In this space, there is only movement that feels right, stillness that feels earned, breath that arrives without being summoned. And if you listen, not with your ears, but with that other part of yourself, the quiet one, buried beneath the noise, you might hear it. The Tao. The Tao does not explain itself. It does not argue, does not persuade, does not pitch or sell. It moves like water, soft and relentless, shaping everything without ever demanding recognition. It does not ask for your loyalty, your sacrifice, or your perfection. It only asks that you stop fighting it. Your steps take you further along the path, though you're not following it with intention or urgency. You are simply walking, letting your feet decide where they wish to go, not in a fugue state of disassociation, but with a calm awareness that grows deeper the less you try to hold on to it. You do not check your phone because it does not exist here. The only notifications come in the form of wind brushing your skin or a distant rustle in the underbrush. You sit beneath a tree, not because someone told you this was a powerful practice for mindfulness or that grounding would align your chakras, but because your body, in its own unspoken wisdom, seeks rest and finds it naturally in the shade. You are not meditating in the formal sense. There is no mantra, no breathing technique, no goal. You are simply here in the presence of everything, absorbing without analysis, existing without strategy. This is the kind of peace that does not announce itself. It does not come with fireworks or dopamine spikes. It comes slowly, like mist over water, until you realize that, for the first time in a very long time, you are not behind. You are not broken. You are not defined by how efficiently you annihilate your inbox. You are not in need of fixing. In the world you came from, silence is a problem to be solved, stillness a gap to be filled, presence a luxury afforded only to those who have already earned their worth. But in the Tao, silence is sacred, stillness is wisdom, and presence is your natural state, one that was never truly lost, only buried beneath the noise of a culture addicted to acceleration. As you remain in this moment, without resistance, you begin to understand something that can't be articulated, only felt. The Tao is not something you find by searching. It is something you uncover by stopping. Not stopping as in quitting, but stopping as in releasing the compulsion to force, to manipulate, to control every variable until life bends to your will. The Tao does not bend, it flows. And if you let go, you can flow with it. Eventually, you will return. To cities, to deadlines, to expectations layered like armor against the soft vulnerability of simply being. But this moment will remain with you, not as a memory, but as a reminder, an anchor. That peace is not a destination. That stillness is not laziness. That doing nothing is not the same as being nothing. You are here. You are breathing. And for once, in the grand and chaotic scheme of things, nothing is wrong. If you were to ask the Tao what it is, it would not answer, not out of rudeness or mystery for mystery's sake, but because it knows that language is already a compromise, an approximation, a human invention designed to point at things that do not need pointing at. The Tao has no shape, yet shapes all things. It has no voice, but everything that speaks does so because of it. And still, we try to define it. We call it the way, the path, the current, the source behind everything that grows, flows, decays, and transforms. It's the rhythm you didn't know you were dancing to, the gravity that pulls your life toward and away from certain moments, the invisible threads stitching the world together, not with knots and tension, but with gentle curves and open space. The Tao Te Ching, the central text attributed to Laozi, begins with a warning. The Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. And already, the paradox is here. Because the moment you try to name the Tao, you've already stepped a little too far from it. It's like describing wind by holding your breath, or explaining light with your eyes closed. You can't trap it, but you can move with it. And that's the point. The Tao is not interested in your mastery. It's not impressed by your theories, your frameworks, or your obsessive need to organize the ineffable into a spreadsheet. It doesn't want you to conquer it. It wants you to notice it. In the same way you might notice the hush that falls just before rain, or the way a child's laugh momentarily resets your entire nervous system. The Tao appears when you stop trying to manufacture life and instead begin to witness it. You don't chase the Tao, you align with it. It's like a current in a wide, endless river. You could thrash against it, sure, build dams, fight floods, command the water to obey your vision. But eventually, exhaustion sets in, and you realize the river was never your enemy. You were simply not listening. What makes the Tao both beautiful and maddening is its refusal to play by our rules. It doesn't reward effort in the conventional sense. You can't earn it, buy it, or win it through sheer will. In fact, the harder you try to catch it, the faster it slips away. And yet, when you release the need to grip, when you simply live, sincerely, gently, attentively, it shows up, quiet and constant, like breath returning to lungs after a long pause. This is not an invitation to apathy. The Tao is not passive, it's participatory. But the participation it asks for is subtle. It wants you to be present enough to recognize when something is unfolding and to resist the urge to interfere unnecessarily. It calls for trust, radical, uncomfortable trust, that the universe knows how to spin itself without your anxious micromanagement. And that's a hard ask, because we've been trained to push, to plan, to solve. We fear stillness. We distrust ease. We think surrender means defeat. But in Taoism, surrender is wisdom. Not giving up, but giving in to something older, deeper, and far more graceful than our constant thrashing. You might begin to notice the Tao in tiny moments, the way a leaf spins as it falls, landing exactly where it's meant to, the timing of a friend's call when you are unravelling, the instinct to pause before saying something you would have regretted. These aren't coincidences, the Tao suggests. They are signals, nudges, alignments. And once you begin to see them, you start to realise how much effort you've been wasting trying to brute force your life into something it was never meant to be. You start letting things happen, not out of laziness, but because you understand the value of flow over friction. You become less concerned with control and more curious about connection, less obsessed with answers and more at peace with questions. The Tao is not a mystery to be solved. It's a presence to be felt, a rhythm to be trusted, and the more you immerse yourself in its unfolding, the more you begin to feel, deep down, that you were never meant to master life. You were meant to dance with it. You do not need to understand the Tao to move with it. You only need to quiet the noise long enough to hear its song. There is a concept in Taoism that, once heard, lingers in the back of your mind, like a half-forgotten melody or a familiar scent on a passing breeze, Wu Wei. It is one of those ideas that refuses to sit still for a definition, resisting the rigidity of translation with the same ease and softness that it asks of your life. Some will call it non-action, others might say effortless doing, but neither of these phrases fully capture the quiet revolution it proposes. Because Wu Wei is not about inaction, it is about unforced action. Not laziness, but precision. Not apathy, but attunement. To understand Wu Wei, you must first look at your own life, honestly and unflinchingly, and ask yourself how many things you force. How often you grind, push, hustle, manipulate, and coerce the world to match your ideas of how it should behave. How often you treat existence like a machine that needs constant adjustment, tightening bolts here, recalibrating gears there, demanding it keep up with your increasingly complex vision of personal success. Wu Wei steps in, not as a reprimand, but as a balm, and simply asks, what if it doesn't need to be this hard? Imagine rowing a boat upstream. Every muscle in your body screams. The current fights back. You clench your jaw, narrow your eyes, and tell yourself that this constant battle is what progress looks like. Then imagine turning the boat around. You're still rowing. You're still moving. But suddenly there's no resistance. The river helps, the oars glide, and for the first time, motion feels natural. That is Wu Wei. It doesn't tell you to stop. It tells you to stop fighting. It invites you to act in harmony with the flow of things, to stop approaching life like it's a cage to be escaped or a mountain to be crushed underfoot. You don't need to dominate the mountain. You can walk its curves, trace its ridges, and still arrive exactly where you need to be. This concept is not just philosophical poetry, it is immensely practical, though it can be difficult to integrate in a world that teaches you to measure value by output and worth by exhaustion. But consider how many things in your day happen more gracefully when you're not overthinking them, when your hands work intuitively, when words come freely in conversation, when you drive and suddenly realize you've arrived without consciously recalling every turn. These are glimpses of Wu Wei, not disengagement, but complete immersion, not effortlessness, but effort aligned so precisely with the moment that it no longer feels like effort at all. Wu Wei challenges your addiction to control. It confronts the illusion that if you just try hard enough, the universe will comply. It replaces tension with trust, rigidity with responsiveness. And in doing so, it reintroduces you to a version of yourself that is quieter, gentler, but infinitely more capable. Because this version is not fighting reality, it is working with it. Of course, letting go is terrifying. You've been taught that surrender is synonymous with failure, that control is the only defense against chaos. But Taoism doesn't see the world as chaotic, it sees it as alive. Complex, yes, unpredictable, sure, but not broken, not hostile. The Tao is not a maze to be solved, but a pulse to be felt. And Wu Wei is the act of moving to that rhythm. This is not to say that effort has no place. Even the most graceful dancer trains. Even the most intuitive painter has moments of frustration and mess, but the difference lies in intention. Wu Wei doesn't ask you to abandon discipline. It asks you to release force. It asks that your action arise naturally from the situation, like a branch bending in the wind rather than snapping under pressure. It asks for presence over planning, responsiveness over rigidity. Think of the craftsman who knows the wood so intimately that his hands move without conscious thought. The musician who loses herself in a song, not because she planned every note, but because she became part of the music. Think of the moments when your breath deepens, your shoulders drop, and for just a second, you are not trying. You are simply doing. That is Wu Wei. That is power without aggression. Motion without friction. So what does this mean for your life? It means you question the value of every clenched muscle and furrowed brow. It means you pause before pushing. It means you stop treating obstacles as enemies and start asking whether they are redirections instead. It means you allow room for serendipity, for timing, for natural unfolding, even when your ego desperately wants to intervene. Because when you practice Wu Wei, you begin to see how much of your exhaustion was never necessary, how much of your struggle came not from life itself, but from your refusal to let it move as it wished. You begin to make peace with uncertainty, not because you've given up, but because you've learned that clarity often emerges in stillness, not speed. Wu Wei is not the art of doing nothing. It is the art of doing the right thing, in the right way, at the right time, without force, without frenzy, without the need to prove anything. It is not passive. It is not weak. It is grace in action. You do not abandon life when you move with Wu Wei. You become more deeply a part of it. You stop shouting instructions at the wind and instead learn to sail. And in that sailing, you find a rhythm that was always there, just waiting for you to let go of the oars. There are historical figures who carve their names into monuments, command armies, and rewrite laws. Their legacy is written in ink, etched in marble, or captured in statues that glare proudly from atop pedestals. And then there is Laozi, old master, wandering sage, ghost with a beard, who left behind only a slim volume of poetic paradoxes, and then disappeared. Not with a bang, not with applause, with a gentle, deliberate turning away. The story goes, though with Taoism, stories are not for literal digestion, but for quiet absorption, that Laozi worked as an archivist in the Zhou dynasty, a quiet keeper of history, a man who watched as society busied itself with the accumulation of names and titles and chaos. He observed a world spinning itself into ever tighter knots of order and governance, and then, at some undetermined age, some say he was 80, some say older, some don't bother guessing, he decided he'd had enough. He mounted a water buffalo and headed west toward the mountains, away from the cities, away from civilization, away from the endless human habit of mistaking noise for meaning. At the gate, the story continues, the border guard recognized him, not from fame, for Laozi was not famous in the usual sense, but from something else, something quieter. The guard asked him not to leave without writing down what he knew, just a few words, something to remember him by. And so Laozi paused, dipped a brush, and wrote the Tao Te Ching, 5,000 characters or so of dense elliptical wisdom, more suggestive than declarative, more music than map. And then he left. We do not know where he went. We do not know if he died in the mountains or became the mountains or simply dissolved into mist. That's part of the point. Laozi is not a figure you follow like a general or emulate like a celebrity. He is a presence, a hint, a question whispered under breath. And the book he left behind, the Tao Te Ching, is not a manual for living, but an invitation to unlearn everything you thought you knew about how to live. Laozi teaches by vanishing. His silence is his wisdom. His exit is the lesson. And in a world like ours, where people fight to be heard, scream to be noticed, and reduce complex truths into digestible, monetizable sound bites, the act of leaving without a trace becomes radical. It becomes a kind of spiritual protest, a refusal to play the game. Laozi was not promoting nihilism or apathy. He was demonstrating that depth does not require display. That truth, when it is real, does not need to be shouted. The Tao Te Ching does not read like a philosophy book. It reads like the weather, shifting, circular. A line about water's strength is followed by one about emptiness, being more useful than fullness. A passage that seems to encourage withdrawal is later counterbalanced by one urging the cultivation of gentleness. It is a book that you do not conquer. You sit with it. You let it move through you, like wind through branches. And like the Tao itself, it refuses to give up its secrets unless you're willing to stop demanding them. Laozi did not build a school. He did not collect disciples or publish commentary. He did not turn his insights into 10-step programs. He walked away. And that walking away has become, over time, its own kind of map. A gesture so complete and sincere that it taught more than volumes of instruction ever could. You don't follow Laozi to find him. You follow him to find the part of yourself that stops needing to follow. In your life, you may not have the luxury of disappearing into the mountains, not forever anyway. You may have rent, obligations, a calendar clogged with meetings and dentist appointments. But the spirit of Laozi is available to you whenever you stop chasing what does not nourish you, whenever you choose quiet over clamour, whenever you close a tab and open a window, whenever you refuse to perform your piece for others and simply sit in the honesty of your own stillness. Laozi reminds us that you can carry truth in your pocket without showing it to anyone, that you can step away without being lost, that you can know deeply and still say nothing. His legacy is not a monument, but a direction, a way of walking, a softness that resists the hard edge of ambition, a gentle resistance to the compulsion of needing to be seen to matter. And perhaps that is the strangest, most liberating part of all, that the greatest teacher in Taoism may be the one who taught by leaving. He did not burn the world down. He did not reorganize its institutions. He did not even ask to be remembered. He just disappeared. And in doing so, left us the clearest instructions of all. Let's be honest, even now, even here, even after chapters of metaphors and mist, there's a part of you that's still twitching to optimize this experience. You're wondering if you're reading fast enough, if you're absorbing correctly, if this new understanding of Taoism can be converted into a morning routine or woven into your personal brand. That part of you, restless, hungry, driven, is not evil. It's just loud, and it's been trained every day of your life to believe that existence must be justified by output. But Taoism isn't impressed by your resume. It's not keeping track of your milestones or clapping every time you level up. It looks at your calendar, filled to the edges with meetings labelled sync, touch base, and deep work, and gently asks, "Are you okay?" Because honestly, you don't look okay. You look like someone who hasn't taken a full breath since 2017. There is a cultural disease, let's name it plainly, that convinces you rest is laziness, that ambition must be relentless, and that your worth is tied irrevocably to how hard you grind. Every commercial, every motivational speaker, every productivity guru has whispered the same poison. If you're not exhausted, you're not doing enough. Taoism has no patience for that lie, not because it hates effort, but because it recognizes that life already carries you. You don't have to drag it by the collar. Take a moment to feel your own exhaustion, not the kind you fix with a weekend nap or an extra shot of espresso, but the deep, soul weariness that comes from treating life like a race you never signed up for. You don't even remember what the prize is. All you know is you're tired, and the idea of stopping feels not like relief, but failure. So you keep going. Faster, louder, more, more, more. Taoism doesn't scream over the noise, it waits underneath it. It doesn't demand your attention, it invites it. And when you finally stop, when you truly stop, you begin to realize just how much energy you've been burning to keep up with illusions that never fed you. You see that stillness isn't the enemy, it's home. But the modern world makes stillness feel like slacking. You've been conditioned to believe that rest is something you earn, not something you deserve by virtue of being alive. That peace must be purchased through effort. That balance is only allowed after you've proven your usefulness. Taoism laughs, softly, kindly, at this madness. It doesn't say rest is optional. It says rest is your default. This doesn't mean you live without motion or never engage with challenge. It means you move from a place of alignment, not fear. It means you act when it's time to act and wait when it's time to wait. It means you stop forcing yourself into timelines that don't match the pace of your soul. You are still doing too much. And that's not a moral failure. It's just momentum. The accumulated inertia of a world that sold you on scarcity and called it motivation. But the Tao is abundant. It doesn't demand that you become something more than you are. It simply invites you to return to yourself. You can let go of the need to be seen, of the pressure to perform, of the belief that you're only as good as your most recent success. You can stop measuring your life by productivity graphs and performance metrics and start asking softer questions. Are you at ease in your body? Are you connected to the people around you? Do you feel, in this moment, like you are living or merely surviving? The answers will not come from apps or algorithms. They will not be found in dashboards or tracking systems. They will arrive when you stop trying to manufacture your life like a product and instead begin to notice it like a garden. Messy, seasonal, wild in ways you can't plan. You don't need a rebrand, you need a return. Return to the part of you that knows how to rest without guilt. Return to the breath that doesn't need to be optimized. Return to the path that doesn't need to be hacked. Taoism doesn't want to fix you. It wants to remind you that you were never broken. So stop. Just for a moment, sit, breathe, let the world spin without you, because it will. Let the urgency dissolve, because it was never real. Let go of the striving that has taken more than it ever gave. You are still doing too much, and you don't have to. If you've ever watched a tree grow, truly watched, through seasons, through stillness, through storms, you might begin to understand something that no spreadsheet or keynote presentation will ever be able to teach you. Nature doesn't rush. It doesn't panic. It doesn't show up to meetings late, frazzled and apologizing, clutching an oat milk latte and a list of regrets. Nature is not in a hurry, and yet it accomplishes everything. A seed falls unnoticed. It doesn't launch a campaign, doesn't set a 5-year plan, doesn't market itself to the soil. It waits, it listens, it opens only when conditions whisper that it's time. And from there, without applause, without followers, without a personal growth guru whispering encouragement, it grows, slowly, silently, without complaint. Taoism loves this rhythm, reveres it, models itself after it. Because nature is the original Taoist. It moves with the Tao, not because it read the Tao Te Ching, but because it never forgot what we have. That alignment with reality is not something to be engineered, but something to be remembered. And nature remembers. Look at water. It doesn't demand access. It flows. It doesn't force openings. It finds them. Given enough time, water will carve canyons, split mountains, reshape coastlines. Not through violence, but through persistence, through softness, through grace. We're told in nearly every arena of life that to succeed, we must be hard, sharp, and aggressive. Taoism disagrees. Taoism says, be like water. When you are like water, you are not passive. You are responsive. You meet what comes. You adapt. You change shape. And you do it all without sacrificing your essence. You are still water, whether you're in a teacup or a floodplain. That's power. Fluid, quiet, deep. We are surrounded by this lesson every day, though we often fail to notice. The tree does not will itself to grow taller by sheer determination. It grows by doing what it was made to do, responding to sunlight, bending with the wind, digging its roots into the mystery of the earth. The ocean does not clock in or out. The moon does not question its pace. The seasons do not apologize for their timing. Everything unfolds at exactly the speed it must. And yet you, dear modern human, try to outpace all of it. You treat growth like a deadline. You treat healing like a performance. You treat existence like a competition you didn't agree to enter, but are terrified to lose. Taoism looks at this and smiles, not with pity, but with recognition, and gently offers you a different model. What if your pace was not a problem? What if slow was not lazy? What if the urgency you feel is not yours, but something inherited, absorbed, mistaken for truth, because it was repeated so loudly? What if you could stop sprinting and still arrive? Nature reminds you that becoming is not supposed to be constant drama. That rest is not a detour. That pausing is not falling behind. The flower does not bloom all year. The bear does not apologize for hibernating. The river does not resent the rock that briefly redirects it. They are all doing exactly what is needed, no more, no less. There is an elegance in this restraint, in this trust. Nature is not afraid of the in-between. It doesn't fear silence. It doesn't need to explain itself, and neither do you. You can allow yourself to move at the pace that your own body, your own spirit demands. You can listen and respond. You can let go of the tempo set by others and find your own rhythm. Taoism isn't anti-effort, it's anti-struggle. It asks, are you using your energy well? Are you fighting the current or moving with it? Are you grinding your soul into dust, trying to achieve something that would come more easily if you just let it? Because here's the truth you keep running from. You don't need to force the unfolding. You don't need to outthink the growth. You don't need to push yourself into bloom before it's time. You are allowed to be where you are, incomplete, in process, in transition, just like everything else in nature. So stop treating your life like a crisis. Stop acting like every pause is a failure. Stop sprinting when walking would let you notice the sky. You are not behind. You are part of a much older, much wiser rhythm that has never needed your panic to function. The Tao doesn't rush, neither does the tree, neither does the wind, neither does the sun, and neither should you. If there's one thing the modern world loves more than coffee, it's ambition. Hustle harder, level up, dominate your niche. This is the gospel we've been fed since the cradle, whispered through advertising, embedded in our education, and hammered home by every self-help book that promises greatness, if only you'll try harder, stay up later, and grind through the pain. Power is the prize, and ambition is the only acceptable compass. But Taoism, with its sly grin and muddy sandals, looks at all this and asks a dangerous question. What if your obsession with power is what's making you miserable? It's not that Taoism is anti-achievement or allergic to effort. It simply doesn't believe that ambition, as we usually understand it, leads anywhere worth going. The Tao doesn't reward domination. It doesn't bow to control. In fact, it tends to erode the very structures built by force. Because in the end, everything that rises too high without balance eventually collapses under its own weight. Taoist texts are filled with cautionary tales about leaders who overreached, kings who clung too tightly, and empires that cracked from within. The message is simple and repeated. The more you grasp, the more you lose. The tighter you clutch at power, the faster it slips through your fingers. And the more you build your identity around ambition, the more brittle that identity becomes. In the Tao Te Ching, Laozi writes, "He who stands on tiptoe is not steady." This is more than poetic imagery. It's a principle. If you constantly stretch beyond your center of gravity, reaching for things you've been told will make you whole, you end up unstable, anxious, disconnected from the ground beneath you. And when the winds come, and they always come, you fall. Taoism offers a different kind of power, a quiet strength that comes from presence, not posturing, from alignment, not aggression. It's the strength of water, which wears down rock not by force, but by persistence. It's the strength of humility, which doesn't seek to prove, but simply to be. It's the strength of someone who knows they don't need to be seen to matter. This kind of power doesn't demand recognition. It doesn't need applause. It moves without needing credit, like roots in the dark, like gravity, like breath. And paradoxically, because it's not wrapped in ego, it's stronger, more enduring, less fragile, less likely to shatter when plans fail or when the world fails to notice your efforts. Ambition, when untethered from wisdom, becomes a hunger that eats you alive. It keeps you chasing future versions of yourself that never arrive. It convinces you that stillness is death and satisfaction is laziness. But Taoism knows that wholeness isn't found in climbing higher. It's found in sinking deeper into yourself, into the moment, into the rhythm of the world around you. You start to see how much of your striving has been performative, a routine performed not for your fulfillment, but for the approval of invisible spectators whose attention you never quite seem to capture. How much of your ambition is a compensation, a shield against inadequacy, an endless campaign to prove that you're not wasting time, not wasting space, not wasting your life. But the Tao doesn't care how impressive you look. It cares how aligned you are. Because when ambition starts to warp your inner compass, you begin making decisions that serve your image rather than your essence. You take the job with the better title, even though it erodes your joy. You say yes to the opportunity that looks good on paper, but deadens your spirit. You pretend to want things that exhaust you, just to maintain the illusion that you're winning. But if the game itself is broken, then what does winning even mean? The Tao invites you to question the game, to stop measuring your worth in metrics and milestones, to stop treating your life like a resume. Instead of constantly asking, what's next? You begin to ask, what's true? Instead of asking, what will they think? You ask, what feels right? In this shift, something breaks open. A kind of space appears in your life, previously crowded by striving. A space where you can hear your own voice again. Soft, subtle, but unmistakably yours. And maybe for the first time you let that voice lead. This doesn't mean ambition vanishes, but it transforms. It becomes rooted in clarity, not craving. It becomes an extension of your inner rhythm, not a replacement for it. You still build, create, contribute, but not out of fear, out of fullness, out of joy. And the things you create this way carry a different kind of power. Quiet, steady, sustainable. Power rooted in the Tao doesn't show off. It doesn't inflate. It holds. It endures. It knows its source, and that source is not the crowd's approval, but the earth beneath your feet, the breath in your lungs, the presence that remains long after applause fades. You begin to understand why Taoist sages often lived on the fringes, on mountaintops, in forests, outside the structures of ambition, because they knew the cost of forgetting what truly matters. They knew that real power doesn't need a stage, it just needs space. Space to grow, space to breathe, space to be. You don't have to renounce the world to live this way, but you do have to stop letting the world define you. You can keep chasing, or you can let yourself be shaped. The choice is yours. Just know this, no amount of ambition will ever feel like enough if you're chasing it to fill a space that was never empty. Sometimes the most powerful move is to stop reaching and start rooting. Sometimes the real win is walking away. And sometimes power means knowing when to sit down, say nothing, and let the wind move the trees. If all of this sounds a little too mellow, a bit too much like a soft-spoken surrender to whatever comes your way, you're not alone in thinking that way, because Taoism, with all its talk of flowing, yielding, and embracing stillness, often gets misinterpreted as a philosophy of inaction, a quiet invitation to withdraw from life's difficulties, to stand aside while the world rolls forward, and to watch without interference, like a bystander on the shore as the river rushes past. But let's be clear from the start. Taoism is not about rolling over and passively accepting whatever chaos lands at your feet. Rather, it is about understanding the subtle yet profound difference between acting for impact and reacting out of habit or fear, about learning when to step in with precision and when to let the moment resolve itself, untouched by your intervention. This idea is perhaps best embodied in the analogy of a seasoned martial artist. Not the one who leaps wildly into conflict or throws punches at every shadow, but the master who waits, who watches, who knows that a single well-timed movement is worth more than a dozen frantic attacks. And when the moment presents itself, that master acts with a calm intensity that is undeniable, effective, and exact. That is Taoism in motion. It's not disengagement, it's not idleness, it is the art of right timing, of knowing when to hold your energy, when to observe the flow, and when to move with such harmony that your actions feel less like intervention and more like inevitability. We live in a world that glorifies speed, rewards urgency, and frames busyness as a badge of honour. We're trained to believe that if you're not doing something loudly, visibly, constantly, then you must be falling behind, losing relevance, or lacking ambition. But Taoism offers a different vision entirely, one where wisdom lies not in being everywhere at once, but in being exactly where you're most needed, only when you're truly needed. This type of presence, this depth of attention, doesn't manifest through constant activity. It arises from deep listening, from quiet observation, from the discipline of waiting for the right current, rather than splashing wildly against the tide, just to prove you're not still. Taoist action, the kind that emerges from stillness rather than from restlessness, is powerful precisely because it is rare, because it is deliberate, and because it is not diluted by the noise of trying to do too much too soon. When you begin to live this way, you find that many of the problems you used to run toward in a panic no longer require your immediate interference, and many of the decisions you once made from a place of fear now feel less urgent, less absolute, less like emergencies and more like unfolding stories that you can step into with clarity when the moment actually calls. This doesn't mean retreating from responsibility, nor does it mean abandoning ambition. It means realigning your efforts so that they arise from a place of calm readiness rather than compulsive reaction. It means understanding that mastery isn't about doing more, but about doing what matters most, with care, with economy, and with unwavering presence. Precision, in the Taoist sense, is not about being cold or calculating, but about being fully attuned to the people around you, to the environment you move through, and to the subtle rhythms within yourself that tell you when to speak, when to act, when to rest, and when to wait. It's the difference between the craftsman who flails with tools and the one who carves a single stroke that transforms a block of wood into something alive. It's the healer who doesn't rush to prescribe, but sits with the body's story until the right medicine becomes obvious. It's the parent who doesn't lecture in frustration, but knows when their child is truly ready to hear, and waits until that window opens. This kind of action is not just effective, it's compassionate, rooted in a respect for timing, for readiness, and for the natural unfolding of things. And it stands in direct contrast to the modern urge to intervene prematurely, to perform productivity, to rush towards solutions before understanding the shape of the problem. The Tao teaches that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is not to act, but to hold your energy until the path opens. And when it does, to move with such clarity, such focus, that even a small gesture becomes transformative. You begin to realize that not every invitation deserves your RSVP, not every fire demands your bucket of water, and not every opportunity is actually aligned with the kind of life you're trying to live. So you stop scattering your attention. You stop apologizing for not responding to every crisis. You begin to move through life like a river through stone, not quickly, not loudly, but with purpose that cannot be denied. There's a quiet terror embedded in the modern psyche, one that whispers constantly in the background, too softly to be named but always there. The fear of insignificance, of being too small, too fleeting, too replaceable in a world obsessed with legacy and permanence. From the moment we become aware of ourselves, we are encouraged, nudged, taught, marketed to, and applauded to become something lasting, to leave our mark, to etch ourselves into history, or at the very least carve out some small, memorable shape in the timeline of humanity. But Taoism, in its gently rebellious way, shrugs at all of that. It doesn't ask you to be immortal. It doesn't ask you to be remembered. It doesn't even ask you to matter in the conventional sense. Instead, it offers a softer, stranger truth. You are not the ocean. You are a wave, and that's enough. A wave rises not because it wants to be seen, not because it hopes to be photographed or remembered or turned into a metaphor, but because the ocean moves, and in that movement, the wave is born. It reaches, it crests, it falls, and it returns. There's no shame in this rhythm, no failure in the falling, no need to explain its shape or extend its life. A wave simply follows the flow. You too are part of a larger movement, a brief expression of something vast, alive, and beyond your understanding. You are not separate from it. You are not above it. You are it. And the Tao, which hums beneath all things, doesn't care how long your name survives, how many people remember your face, or how many goals you tick off a list drawn in fear. It cares only that you move with truth while you're here. And that movement doesn't need to be dramatic. You don't need to conquer mountains or rewrite books or build temples. You don't need to be exceptional by anyone else's standard. The cherry blossom does not bloom so it can be ranked. It blooms because the season asked it to. Then it falls, and that falling is beautiful. The modern mind, however, resists this kind of surrender. We've built entire industries around the idea that impermanence is a threat rather than a fact. We freeze moments in photographs, we hoard memories as proof of meaning, and we scramble to build monuments out of fleeting accomplishments, believing that legacy is something we can manufacture if we just hustle hard enough. But what if the real beauty of your life is not in what you leave behind, but in how fully you inhabit the moments that are given to you? In Taoism, there is no obsession with permanence. Things grow, things decay, things return to the earth. Nothing clings, nothing stays. Even the greatest rivers eventually dry or change course. Even the stars burn out. And none of it is tragic, it's just what is. And that acceptance, that radical surrender to the cycle of things, is where peace begins. You don't have to fight time. You don't have to beat mortality in order to be meaningful. In fact, it is often the brevity of an experience that gives it value, like a laugh shared between strangers, or the final golden light before dusk. Taoism teaches that presence is the real treasure, not preservation. When you stop trying to stretch your life into something it was never meant to be, endless, permanent, larger than nature allows, you can finally rest inside the truth of your own impermanence. You can begin to see that being temporary doesn't make you meaningless. It makes you part of something sacred. And your job is not to resist that transience. It's to participate in it fully. It means allowing yourself to love deeply, even when you know it won't last. It means giving your best effort to a creation you might never see finished. It means speaking honestly, showing up gently, and existing without the constant pressure to turn yourself into a monument. You don't have to live forever. You just have to live well while you're here. That means showing up in the moment you've been given. It means offering your presence instead of your perfection. It means being kind without expectation, creating without comparison, loving without trying to trap love in glass. It means letting go of the need to be remembered and embracing the chance to be real. Because the truth is, permanence is a fantasy, and trying to chase it only pulls you further away from the very life you're trying to preserve. But when you stop chasing and start noticing, when you let each breath matter just because it's yours to breathe, something shifts. The wave becomes sacred, not because it's remembered, but because it was real. A wave doesn't apologize for its brevity. It simply rises. So do you. And when the time comes, you fall, not as a failure, but as a return to the source you never truly left. You are the Tao in motion, no longer chasing permanence, finally free to be here. You've heard the ideas, you've met Laozi, you've walked the mountain path, you've listened to the wind, watched the water, and maybe, just maybe, you've let your foot ease off the accelerator long enough to notice the silence that lives beneath the noise. You've caught glimpses of the Tao not as a concept or a doctrine, but as something familiar, like a scent from childhood, or a song you almost remember. And yet, the question lingers. You've caught glimpses of the Tao not as a concept or a doctrine, but as something familiar, like a scent from childhood, or a song you almost remember. What do you do with this? Because unlike other systems, Taoism doesn't give you a checklist. It doesn't hand you a 10-point plan for inner peace or a calendar full of affirmations and deadlines. There's no initiation ceremony, no badge, no moment when someone taps you on the shoulder and says, "Congratulations, you've achieved Taoist enlightenment." Instead, Taoism offers you space, which is harder than it sounds. It offers you the discomfort of no longer being told what to want. It gives you the raw material of your own life and says simply, work with what's here. Now, you live. Not in the idealized, perfected sense, but in the way grass lives, in the way rain falls, in the way the moon wanes without apology. You wake up, you breathe, you do the next thing, not because it gets you closer to a goal, but because it's the thing that needs doing. You stop arguing with reality. You stop measuring your value in productivity. You begin to walk through your day with a kind of softness, a kind of curiosity. You begin to trust that your life doesn't need to be impressive to be meaningful. Sometimes that means being brave. Sometimes that means saying no. Sometimes it means cancelling the meeting, calling a friend, cooking something slowly, standing in the rain without checking the time. Sometimes it means doing nothing at all. Taoism doesn't demand that you become passive, but it does ask that you become honest about your pace, about your motives, about your habits of force and your fear of stillness. It asks you to see where you're swimming upstream, just to avoid admitting that the current knows better than you do. You listen to yourself, to the moment, to the part of you that knows how to move without needing to control. You listen until you no longer need to fix everything, explain everything, improve everything. You listen until action becomes an extension of presence, not panic. And slowly, the world begins to feel different, not because it changed, but because you stopped fighting it. You don't have to constantly upgrade yourself to be worth something. You don't have to fix your past in order to deserve your future. You just have to come back. Back to the breath, back to the body, back to the moment you're actually living, instead of the one you think you're supposed to be chasing. This doesn't mean you stop dreaming or building or caring, but it means you stop tying your peace to an outcome. It means you learn to let things go before they rot in your hands. It means you understand that sometimes the next best step isn't forward, but inward. You realize that not every answer needs to be loud. Not every plan needs to be public, and not every truth needs to be proven to be real. You start doing less not because you've given up, but because you finally understand what's worth your time and what's just noise in nicer clothes. And in all this, you begin to feel something else, something subtler, but stronger than adrenaline or achievement. You begin to feel peace, not the peace of everything going right, the peace of no longer needing it to. This is the Tao, not as an idea, but as a rhythm you're beginning to trust. It's the stillness between efforts, the breath before speech, the space between the falling leaf and the ground. And you, imperfect, curious, alive, are part of it, just by being here. Taoism doesn't promise that life will be easier, but it does show you how to stop making it harder. It doesn't tell you what to do. It reminds you that you already know. And for today, that's enough. Like, subscribe, or leave a comment if this helped you breathe slower, think softer, or just remember you're allowed to be here. If it made the noise fade, even for a second, that's worth sharing. Thanks for being part of this quiet resistance. See you next time.